Welcome to the Bear Collective podcast, where we meet you at the edge of what you know and dance with you into the depths of what you don't in all things personal development, relationships, and lifestyle. We empower you to take what you need and leave what you don't. Thank you for listening, watching, and subscribing. Let's get into today's episode. And we're kind of following up on a promised episode here. We had a bit of like a response from was it our first episode?
Yeah.
Yes.
Very first episode on vulnerability, the B word.
Yes. And so we did an initial follow-up on that delved deeper into like half of that and how to respond, how to emotionally dump in a healthy way.
Yeah. How to do empowered vulnerability.
Yes.
And what doing emotional dumping is like. Yeah.
Yes. And so now we're kind of flipping that.
Yes. To receiving emotional dumping energetically, what that feels like. And then also receiving empowered vulnerability and what that feels like. So it's really going to give you more depth and it's really going to strengthen your communication, your relationships, strengthening your relationship with yourself and how you communicate things, but also strengthening your relationship with friends, partners, the people in your life, family, all the things.
100%. So let's start off with the first one.
Yeah. So receiving emotional dumping, it feels heavy. It feels draining. And it's like you're being talked at rather than being talked with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just going to cover off on the three and then we'll go into commentary.
Great. Let's see if I can remember them.
Yeah. It's where someone is talking about all the things that are external to them and they're blaming and judging. So the example, if you think of a relationship, you are, blaming your partner, you are blaming your partner, you're, judging them for their actions. And what they did maybe in a relationship versus, taking responsibility for yourself. And it also lacks vulnerability. So it remains quite surface level and just, again, very externally focused. There's kind of like no self-awareness in the role that you played.
Yeah.
That they played because you're receiving that emotional dumping.
Yes. And I know like right at the start there you said like it can be really heavy to receive this. I can also see there's another side where like you might be out with a group of girlfriends and you're all having drinks and having a good time and maybe it actually feels really light and fun in the moment. But then maybe it's that like backlash that you have afterwards of like, oh, what did I say about that? Or like, I wonder if they're going to judge me about my opinion on that when I really emotionally dumped that onto them.
Yeah.
Without thinking.
Yeah. Secondhand guilt, secondhand.
Yeah.
Bit of remorse, bit of guilt, bit of ick feeling.
Yes, but I definitely think this can feel heavy and it can feel light initially.
And I would say in both cases too, receiving emotional dumping, it can make you want to avoid that person.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Even not responding to a text. Like, let's say you get a text that's like, oh, the worst thing happened today. And this happened. And this person did this. And I feel like this. And it's not.
When you're on the receiving
end of that. And it's not vulnerable. And you read that. And all of a sudden you go, oh, like, and your day starts to feel like that.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you do?
Yeah, because maybe you have a standard or a value that you value friendships and you value responding. You don't want to ghost that person, but also you kind of just don't want to deal with that text right then and there.
Yes. Yes. I have
been. It's going to open up more of that can of worms, right? If you feel that, if I go there, it's going to open up a can of worms, then you're used to receiving emotional dumping from that person. That's another indicator.
Makes so much sense. And like, I want to really put here, we don't have to write back to those people.
Immediately.
We can totally, it's a lot easier over text, but we can totally just put that phone down and go, yeah, no, not for me today. And address it later if we need to. Definitely give yourself permission if this has happened to you or happens to you.
Yeah. And I think this is going to be something that's really interesting when you actually sit and take this in. You're going to start to notice this more in your communication. Whether you're going out socially with friends, whether you're just having a one-on-one hangout with a friend, whether you're with a partner, colleague, you're going to start noticing, this starts to feel really heavy receiving. I feel like this person's always complaining, they're always blaming, they're always judging. Like, we have some awareness that they're just not taking responsibility, or we can sense that this is the same pattern happening over and over again as well. And that gives you a bit of the ick of not wanting to sit there with that person and deal with it. Or you tend to either, if you're an empath, you more than likely sit there and listen to it, even though you don't really want to. But it's part of your nature or your self-image that you are someone who is kind, who is caring, who is a good listener. You've been told that you're a good listener, that you're a good friend. And so you feel responsible to sit there and listen and to receive it.
Yeah, without doing anything about it. Maybe without reflecting that it's an issue for you. Because I know, like, sometimes being an empath, you don't necessarily see the heavy things that are going on, like what's heavy for you. You're just kind of taking in all these people's things and then going home at the end of the day.
Yeah. You're generally an empath because you've experienced some heavy things in your life.
Yeah.
Which makes you open and expanded to those depth of emotions. But it doesn't make them healthy to receive.
Yeah.
So receiving empowered vulnerability, it's where somebody's actually talks about their emotions and their feelings in the present moment, how they're feeling. They're actually opening up to you versus dumping on you. So it's more focused on a specific thing or a specific part of the problem. And the more that they talk, they're opening up deeper about themselves. So you feel like you're actually learning, and you're potentially learning together, because they're coming into awareness as they're sharing about their problem, their experience. They're coming into awareness through opening up about, a red flag that they missed, or somewhere where they could have taken responsibility, or something that they've learnt from that they're going to take into the future.
And would you say, like, vulnerability can even just be, like, as a starting point, maybe for some people, like, just sharing how you're feeling about something without maybe necessarily taking a learning from it, but just being really open about a feeling.
As long as it's taking responsibility and owning it.
And knowing it's yours.
And knowing it's yours.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's not like, I feel bad because of this person.
Yes.
And they made me feel bad.
Correct. Yes.
Right? Because they made me feel bad. That's blame.
Yeah, that statement. That statement. Yes. No, I agree, because I do think for some people it's so hard to even just know where to start with being empoweredly vulnerable. And I think just the basic of, I felt really like awful in this moment. It is a great starting point, just naming that emotion or that feeling. Yeah.
So giving some language, if you're in a conversation with someone, and I feel like everybody does know somebody where they have received this, or a time in your life. Maybe this is something you've worked on and you've cleaned it up in your life, which is fantastic. But I think everyone knows somebody where they either, have that ick, they avoid responding to that text message, they avoid meeting up or try and delay meeting up with that person, or they're sitting there in the moment and they've wanted to really listen to what someone is saying, but then it begins to start to feel really heavy and really draining on you. So what do you do? What do you do? So some tools that you can use, some language that you can use, is you can actually, again, just using a nice calm voice, you can just ask that person to pause and say, this is feeling really heavy to receive. How does it feel for you?
And there's so much power in that, right? Because it gets that person who is sitting there, like maybe dumping or venting, to reflect about, how am I feeling? rather than just offloading these feelings verbally to the other person.
Yeah, because it gets you to be conscious in the moment.
Yeah.
Right. And it may feel like a bit of a shock to that person in the beginning because it's bringing them back into consciousness. Because remember, when you're doing the emotional dumping, it's not conscious. It's not conscious of time. It's not conscious of the other person's like space or energy. Has no structure, often talks about multiple problems and multiple things at once. It's chaotic, right? For lack of a better term, it's chaotic.
Yeah.
In what's coming out. So when you can actually, like I said, it's just about the way that you say it. So just saying it in a really kind way.
Yeah.
Pause for a moment. How does this feel for you? It's feeling really heavy for me to receive.
Yeah.
And you can also ask, what would you like me to, how would you like to receive? Would you like to receive feedback? Would you like me to sit and listen to this? Do you just need space right now? What is it that you need from this kind of conversation?
Yeah.
And it's also okay to put a time limit on that yourself, to put that boundary up and to say, okay, I have about 5 minutes, or I have about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
You can, at that time, you can interject, you can pause, you can ask that question of what is it that you need from me in this moment? And if they say, I just need you to listen, say, okay, my energy capacity is almost reached its brim today. I have about 3 to 5 minutes. Like, please continue.
Yeah. And then I think an important piece of that is, if the other person goes over the 3 to 5 minutes, which they are likely to, let's be real. Yes.
Yeah.
Holding that boundary for yourself and going, okay, like, I know we said 3 to 5 minutes. Like, I've really reached that point. Can we change the subject now? Like, let's move on. Or like, okay, I have to go. Yes, we'll revisit this later.
Yeah.
Let's put a pin in it.
Yeah. Because I think something that's important to note is, whilst we want to be kind, empathetic, caring friends and very nurturing, and if we don't, then we're rejecting that person, or they might reject us, and we might end up with no friends if we're not doing what is expected of us. I really want to point out, unless you're qualified, you are not a therapist or a coach.
Yeah.
So you are not responsible for solving that person's problems, especially if they are something that is very heavy of nature. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important to point out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's taking responsibility in the conversation is another thing to reflect on. Because again, as an empath, and for all my empaths out there, if you're still thinking about the person's problem and how to solve it when the person's left the room, that's unhealthy.
Yes.
That's unhealthy. You're taking on the responsibility, you're taking on the energy, you're taking on the person's problem as if it's your own.
Yeah.
And that is not your responsibility in life. And that does not make you a bad friend. That does not make you, not caring. It doesn't make you not loyal. It doesn't make you all the things that you think it, makes you not.
Yeah.
Is untrue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I really like that one. Like, it's important because, I think then that's where we can go into trying to fix other people's problems and what happens to our life. Like, what happens to your day to day? What bandwidth do you have for yourself then when you're really so over focused on other people? Yeah.
And when you're actually receiving empowered vulnerability, you might actually find that you're learning through with that person about yourself.
I think so. I think it's like it unlocks a door to allow the relationship to go to this beautiful level where you're getting to know someone intimately, but you're also learning to share yourself more intimately and openly and freely. And how much do we all value freedom, whether we're consciously aware of it or not?
And I think, this example is going to be a bit random, but we were talking yesterday about your pregnancy and some of the things that are not spoken about, and we were discovering whether it was kind of like it's very vulnerable and very exposing to share some of the things and the changes that happen to your body as you're going through pregnancy, and you don't often know until you actually go into it.
Yes.
But you shared a moment where you had a friend who is also pregnant but has also gone through a pregnancy before, and you guys shared something vulnerably and you felt more connected because you were simply just raw and honest about what was going on for you.
Yes. And it also helped.
Connected and wanted you.
Yeah. And it helps stop those feelings of like, is it just me? How often do we sit there and go, oh, it's just me that does this? And then that creates shame.
Yeah.
So it really opens up and lets you go, oh, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah.
It builds community.
Yeah. So we don't want you to not talk
to
people.
No.
We're simply saying that we're cleaning up the way you communicate with people. If you have somebody who, when you say, well, how does this feel for you? This is feeling very heavy to receive. If they take hyper offense to that and shut down, what it then is about is letting them have their process, letting them have their reaction. And again, you not absorbing it or taking that on, right? It's kind of like, to use an analogy or a bit of an example, parallel example, would be as a parent, if you're in a shopping center with a child who's having a tantrum, do you match that child and have a tantrum too, just so that you're equal? Or do you let the child have the process of having the tantrum and then meet when they become more regulated?
Powerful question.
Yeah. So allow your friend to have their process. They might take some time or some space away from you. That's a strong reaction. They might go into avoidance. That's okay. Again, it's about protecting your space. It's communicating that, hey, look, I would love to have a deeper relationship and a deeper connection with you. I would love to stay focused on one topic or like one part of the problem and how I could support, you working through this. Yes.
And then if they're not wanting to work through it, which so many aren't, if you have to say to this person, I don't want to receive this anymore. Like, this is not a topic that feels safe, comfortable, light, connecting, whatever for me, do that. Like, you might have to have this conversation with people. Like, if you've got a friend who's in a really toxic relationship and they just keep coming at you with the same stories, but they don't change anything, and you just don't want to hear it anymore or have the capacity to hear it anymore, set that boundary.
Yeah, it's okay to draw the line in the sand. You have permission. And this is something I had to do in a relationship, in a friendship that I was in, where a friend of mine had broken up with a partner. And for 7 months, every time I met up with this person, it was talking about the same, part of that breakup. And there was no change, no accountability, no responsibility, no growth, no self-reflection. It was still just all blame and like why this happened or why it didn't happen and what they should have done and what they didn't do. And I end up having to say, at that point, after 7 months of patience, which is actually now in my world too long, I let it carry on too long, and a couple of years back. But I end up having to say, enough. If you want to talk about this particular breakup and this person, I'm no longer the person to receive this, because I've provided advice, I've given support, I've given suggestions, and I haven't seen any growth. And that's only hurting me because I'm just seeing you continue to hurt and not choosing differently for yourself.
Yeah. And how powerful is it wording like that? Because it's not necessarily just about how, like, you can receive this. It's also about watching these people that you care about hurting and allowing themselves to keep hurting. So I think what you said is really potent there.
Yeah, it's tough love and directness, but delivered with love.
Yes.
Like, as a friend, I want to see you grow. So that's where having my own boundaries, having my own standards, calling out or asking those questions of, how does it feel? Does it feel healthy for you right now? What would feel healthy? What would make this a productive conversation? How could, again, it depends on the context of what you're talking about. If you're talking about an initial breakup, again, I think I may have mentioned this on an episode or an upcoming episode that we have. I do recommend with a breakup, at least before reaching out to people, take a little bit of space to process for yourself.
Yeah.
Before going into the dumping, like non-processed dumping. but then set up the conversation to say, hey, do you have space and capacity for me to vent right now? I need to offload this just to process. I don't need any advice back. I'm not looking for that.
Yeah.
If it gets too much, pause. Like, how cool is that to have conversations that are really conscious? That makes it feel really safe too. Right? Because otherwise, if we're not checking in with the other person, we're not building, we're not creating, we're just creating these, using these unconscious expectations that, oh yeah, you should just be there, you should just listen, because that's how it is.
Yeah.
That's how society defines relationships and friendships and what we should expect in our communication. No, get more clear, will get you more deeper, and it'll get you more growth. And that way you'll also be able to call out your friends and say, hey, I can see this is really hurting you right now. How could we help move towards healing? Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of wondering, I mean, I know we come from a place of personal development and you're a coach and I'm a psychologist, and it's like, you know, we're used to having these sorts of conversations with people. Is it so easy for someone to call out who hasn't had the skills? I mean, I think it's important, like, this is going to take practice for people. Absolutely. And like you've said in previous episodes, like, it's going to be messy. Yeah. you might get yourself to a point where you unfortunately say to someone like, oh, could you just shut up? Like, and then you kind of go, oh, sorry, let's pause. Yeah. Pause, safe word. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Personal development, relationships, they are skills. Yeah. We need to continue building skills. And building skills is lifelong. And then it's refining them. Yes. And this is simply refinement. Yeah. And when I started integrating this into my relationships, I have plenty of friends who are not in the industry whatsoever, who have really valued and appreciated the shift in communication and the way that it's taken place, that they've actually got curious and kind of like asked. They've also learned from it. They've also come back and been like, remember that conversation you had with me and how you said this? I did that in a conversation, and like they had this really beautiful experience out of it. So ripple effect. Yeah. You clean it up. And this is where we talk about personal responsibility really is your personal power. Because when you clean it up, you'll watch the people around you start to clean it up. And again, those who don't, they're either not for you at this point in your life, they're not there already on the journey. That should not stop your journey. Yes, yes. Don't hold yourself back to stay where someone else is. Do not hold yourself back. This needs to be an episode. Yeah. Oh boy. Gosh. That hits, that lands. Larissa's fairy lights are going off. It's her brain thought. Yeah, Christmas lights. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, I also want to like touch on here, you know, receiving vulnerability. If it's not something that you have done much of, it can also feel very uncomfortable. Knowing what to say to someone, knowing how to respond to someone when they're being really vulnerable. For some people, that's going to set off like a myriad of protective responses or barriers, like avoidance, like silence, like shutdown, because vulnerability, like naturally to a lot of people, just doesn't feel really safe to give or to receive. So I think it's really like important, if someone is being vulnerable with you, I would always say, like, if you aren't feeling safe in that right now, name it. Name that, like, be vulnerable back and say, wow, like, thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. I'm really not sure like what to say to that. Like, it's okay to call that out. Yeah. It's okay to call that out. It's also okay just to say thank you for sharing that. Correct. And not needing to have a similar experience or find something to have a Me Too moment. Yes. I think Me Too moments
can be really toxic. I see them being really toxic, done on repeat.
Yeah.
Like where people share something about themselves that's quite vulnerable, and then another person in the dynamic goes, oh my God, this happened to me, and da da da. Like that can be so unhealthy.
And that's what we call trauma bonding.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And again, what kind of relationships and friendships are you choosing to have? What kind of discussions are you choosing to have? Again, we're not saying that, again, you have problems in life. We're not saying do not discuss the problem. We're not saying do not discuss the heartbreak. We're not saying do not discuss the loss or the rejection or the fear. We're not talking about suppressing.
Yeah. We're
talking about how you communicate it in a way that's actually going to be empowering and connecting for you.
Yes.
And as you were saying, you don't always need to have a Me Too moment. You can simply say, thank you for sharing. Or I see you.
Yes.
I see you more clearly. I hear what you're saying. I understand you better. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
A lot of people simply need acknowledgement and that kind of validation in that moment to be seen and to be heard because they have not been through that experience that they're obviously bringing into the conversation. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think even, you know, potentially if the situation is right, like, is there anything I can do?
Yeah.
Just offering.
And check in with yourself before you do that you're not doing it unconsciously.
Yes.
Because you don't know what's going to be on the receiving end of that.
No.
So make sure you have the capacity for what they may ask of you.
Absolutely.
And if you do happen to go unconscious and say, what can I do to help? And they ask you something that is maybe extends beyond your needs, like, or your capacity to be able to provide them. Say, thank you for sharing. That's going to extend beyond my capacity at this present moment. Is there somebody that can help support you with this? Or if you can take a portion of that and I could help you with this part I'm, you know, not familiar with, not comfortable with, you know, don't have capacity for, is there somebody else? Who might that person be?
Yes.
Even asking who might that person be, so it allows them, when they're in that emotionally vulnerable state, it allows them to think about another person who they could reach out to. And that way, as a friend, like, you know, in whatever time frame, a week's time, when you check in with them, you might say, how did you go with, you know, speaking to Jazz about that thing? Yeah. Yeah. You know? So it's showing that you're still there, you're still caring, you're still thinking. Yeah. And there's progress and you're moving forward. If they have not done anything with that, then again, you've just got to check yourself on continuing to receive the same kind of conversation where there's no progress. Yeah, or productivity out of it. Yeah, it's not moving somewhere. Yeah, definitely, because you cannot help someone help themselves, or who doesn't want to be helped. Yeah. And yes, there are people out there who simply want to stay in the problem. Yes, they like that problem frequency. Yeah, definitely. So we hope that helps give some context or deeper context to receiving emotional dumping versus empowered vulnerability. Hope it's given you some ideas on how to hold space for that, and whether, you know, checking in with whether you can hold space for those and things. Language, different kinds of language to use, giving yourself permission to not have the answers and to not have a perfect response, and to know that it's a skill that you have to build over time. Yeah. And you only build it by testing and trying it out. Yeah. Experimenting. Yeah. So thank you for listening, watching, and subscribing. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And we'll see you next time. Bye. Bye.